the mafia strand of the story. So in the Salvatore story, the Ndrangheta are quite, because they are family-based units. It's not sort of top-down structure. It's different kind of families who operate in a sort of constellation of crime families, and they're very hard for law enforcement to penetrate because frequent, organized crime groups are based on sort of blood and marriage, are sort of less likely to betray each other, basically. And so historically, it's been hard to have, what in Italian called pentiti, like sort of people who become state witnesses and stuff like that. But in the case of Salvatore's family, there are actually a relatively large number of people who had become state witnesses over time. And some of them, so there were sort of, I was using two, and that meant that they gave a vast amount of testimony. They sit down with a prosecutor and they do interviews, going on for hours and hours and hours, which, I got hold of those interviews. And so that gives you a sort of a very different way into understanding a world and personalities and motivations than, a sort of an indictment, for example, because you have people sort of talking about often the sort of quite small details, the banalities of what they do. And, and in the case of Salvatore, he had a girlfriend, he was having an affair with a Ukrainian woman called Oksana, who is an important character in the book. And she became a state witness, and she, her perspective is extremely fascinating. Not only because, she's a woman in an extremely kind of chauvinistic and male dominated environment. But she was not directly involved in crime. She's someone who she was aware of what was going on. But because Salvatore would come back home after a day's work, so to speak, he would sort of sit in her kitchen and he would unload about his day, about maybe everyone would, you start talking about, this guy who owes me money, hasn't paid me any money, he's an idiot, or this person hasn't screwed up this deal, with this guy. So he's just sort of telling her all of his just frustrations of his life. But in the kitchen, the Italian financial police had put a sort of ambiental listening device. So you're just getting all of this stuff where, they're watching TV. They'll be watching a show with, an action film with people running around with Kalashnikovs. And he just turns around to his girlfriend and says, oh, I've got 2 Kalashnikovs. And she goes, oh, that's really interesting. I was like, it's just this sort of these strange moments, which add a sort of texture to, they're not sort of legally important, but they paint the sort of universe that these people live in, where, the sort of the fact of the normality of that sort of thing, which would be quite shocking to anyone else.